people, it puts a pressure on them to act a certain way in front of others. To look a certain way, act a certain way. And that might be you. You're so used to impressing people with how, whatever, religious you are, knowledgeable you are, committed you are, etc., etc. And you're constantly putting up this face that you start convincing yourself that's who you really are. We have to be able to be honest to ourselves if we're going to talk about change. One has to be able to stop complaining about the world and start complaining about themselves. What is wrong? What am I doing wrong? What are my shortcomings? What are the things that I look at myself and I say, what, if there were 4 or 5 things I could change about myself, if I could just do 4 or 5 things differently, what would they be? What would those things be that I wish I changed? What are some things I wanted to accomplish last year and I never got to? I really wanted to though. I wanted to memorize like 2 more surahs. I wanted to study something. I want to finish reading that book. I never got around to it. But I really wanted to do it. What is keeping us from making those changes? That's the real bit of advice that at least I'll share with you what I do for myself. It works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. But I'm hoping inshallah you'll be better at it than I am, and we're all going to be making changes for the better in our own lives. What I do for myself is basically ask myself a very simple question. I have 2 kinds of days. I have days where I'm home and days that I'm traveling. I've divided my life into 2 kinds of days. Days when I'm traveling and days when I'm home. And there are failures, because days that I'm home are all the same. Whether it's last week or the next week or 2 years before or 2 years after, it's going to be similar. They're all going to be the same. And the days that I'm traveling are all going to have similar things in them. There's going to be going from home to the airport and getting onto the plane and passing out, and then the flight attendant waking me up to get off the plane. All that's going to be the same every time. There's going to be repetition. And in each of those 2 kinds of days, there are some things I could do better. There's some way I could use my time better. I could be more productive in some things. How do I make more use of that day? How do I make it more productive? That one day. You can fix one day, you've fixed your whole life. If you made one change to today, that means you've made that change for the rest of your life. For you, many of you, it's like weekdays and weekends. Your weekends are the same way every time. Your weekdays are the same way every time, right? Fix your weekdays. This time is for salat. Right after that, there's this time for Quran. There's this time for me to learn something. There's this time for me to get my homework done, or whatever it may be. Discipline your life. Make that change in your life. You know what else people fail to do? That's most common, and I personally have trouble with that also. And it's one of the hardest things to do, is to maintain balance in your life. To maintain balance. Because we're pulled in many different directions. Our parents want our time. Our husbands and wives want their time. Our children want their time. Our career wants its time. Our friends want their time. Our masjid wants its time. Ourselves, we want to just be left alone. We need some time to ourselves. We have all these different pulls, right? And it's really important that we maintain a balance between all of these different pulls. And a lot of times, we fail to do it. And when we do, we end up wronging one thing or another. This is the biggest change you can bring in your life to create balance. There are people who give their wife a lot of time and their parents no time at all. There are people who give their parents a lot of time and they spend no time with their wife. There are people who are so bent upon fixing their career, they are almost not even existent in the lives of their children. It happens. And then there are those interesting characters who don't want anything to do with home, so they volunteer at the masjid all the time. I love masjid volunteers, but the guy says, hey, I'm going to put up the chairs 3 days before the program, and I'll even sleep here. There's a problem at home. Go home. Get some balance in your life. Right? We have to really assess, honestly, in our lives, what changes do we have to make? And really, changes to me is what you give time to. I mean, the real asset all of us have is time. That's really all we have. And if we're utilizing it properly, our lives have moved towards the better. And if we're not, our lives are moving towards the worse. Allah tells us the sun and the moon, they follow an order. All of the acts of worship that we do in Islam somehow fall upon the sun and the moon. The prayers dependent on the positions of the sun. Eid and Ramadan and Hajj on the moon. And Allah tells us the sun and the moon follow a precise order. Our worship follows a precise order. What we're learning from that is your entire life should follow a precise order. Otherwise you'll keep thinking, I should get that done, and you'll never get it done, because it never made time for it. We're just the people, once we start playing a video game, we lose all track of time. But once you hit the PS3 or Xbox controller, and you start sniping people off the rooftops, right? That's it. Regimes could change. The world could change. The stock market could crash. You wouldn't know, you're in your room going, that's who you are. We have to show respect to time. That's the real change we bring in our lives. Stop complaining about stuff. All of that will happen when you personally bring a positive change in your life.